Money Matters, the JSE was firmer this morning, while global peers were mixed. Overall, activity in the market is relatively muted as traders wait for today's key employment data. Senior Portfolio Manager at Benguela Global Fund Managers, Grant Nader, joins us now for a wrap of the latest market developments. Thank you very much, Grant, for your time on this Friday. Let's start with an overview of how the markets are faring at midday trade.
I think you summed it up well. It is fairly muted on the top line. The market's up 0.1%. What we are seeing is a couple of things stand out. So the PGM group, which has been heavily sold off over the past month, hasn't yet managed to find a bounce. We are seeing a bit of weakness in the retailers, and some of the rand hedges giving back a little bit as the rand strengthens for a change today, which is nice. It did have a very weak day yesterday, and it's better by about 0.75% today, which is good to see. And there's some strength in the financials and the real estate and thus best process. So it's quite mixed and overall fairly muted, as you said.
Okay. Oil prices are stable but are on course for a week-on-week loss. Help us make sense of the moves.
So, yeah, we've seen, oil has come off from, over the past, let's say, from its high. Recently, it's down about 11.5%. And what's happened is the strong rally of about 30% off the lows was driven by the supply side fears around the cuts from Saudi and Russia. But in fact, there's a two-sided equation. There's supply and demand. And what we've seen as the global economy starts to slow, we're seeing those demand factors starting to play out. Some of the inventory numbers are showing slowing demand and a bit of a build on the inventory side. And so the market got a bit of a fright as we see those rate hikes slow the economies down globally. And we're seeing the balancing equation play out there.
So Apple has begun talks with DuckDuckGo to replace Google, a subsidiary of Alphabet, as the default search engine in private browsing mode on its Safari web browser, meaning what?
So that's a little bit of a misleading story. As part of this antitrust case against Google, they're investigating what happened in the past. And Apple had in 2018 and 2019 and 2020, they had conversations then with DuckDuckGo about using them for their private browsing mode where it doesn't track data. And then they decided against it. So this is an open and shut event that's happened in the past already. At the same time, they also looked at Bing, a Microsoft search engine, and they also chose, after studying the outcomes and the results, they said that Google actually delivers a better service, a better quality of search results, and they also elected not to use Bing. So this is part of this greater antitrust case, and it does highlight, once again, the quality of the Google service and the dominance that it holds.
Does that give credence to if it's not broken, don't fix it, Grant?
You could say that, and I think the important thing to remember, even if they do have a monopoly, consumers are still benefiting from Google's dominance because it's a great product, and the pricing in our pocket isn't being hurt by the monopolistic behavior. So that's a big part of the equation.
Sure. Okay, back home, South Africa's biggest banks have warned the competition tribunal that giving Segunjalo an extension to the interim relief it granted the firm back in 2022 over the closure of its banking facilities would create what they call legal chaos. What's the latest?
Again, so there's a lot of noise here, and really what's happened is the banks had closed some of these Segunjalo accounts. I think it was led by Standard Bank. Then there was an interim interdict saying that the banks need to hold off on closing these accounts because they're going to damage this company and there's going to be financial chaos. Segunjalo has about 35 subsidiaries, and what's happened is this interdict is now expiring and they're looking for renewal of the interdict. And what the banks are saying is that there are still accounts that are open elsewhere, and FirstRand and Standard Bank can close their accounts, but companies like Mercantile Bank are still offering them accounts, and although they are not allowing new accounts, they are still able to operationally transact through those accounts. So the counter argument is that there's a reputational risk to the banks, and they believe they're entitled to close these accounts. And Segunjalo is arguing that this is the banks being monopolistic, and what they'll do is one will follow the other, and ultimately they'll all close the accounts, and they'll have nowhere left to turn. So it's really down to the courts here to decide what's reasonable and what isn't. It's a bit of a tricky one, and I think the reputational risk is a real thing, especially in the banking system.
Yeah, because that was my question. What does reputational risk mean? As you said, it's a bit of a tricky one.
It is. Banks are built on trust. That's the foundational building block of banking. And if South Africans decide that they no longer trust the banking system, or individual banks whose reputation becomes tarnished, by perhaps servicing companies of questionable origins, let's say, then it puts them at risk. So I think it is within their purview to make those decisions, but they have to be able to substantiate what they see as reputational risk.
Because Sekunjalo, in substantiating their case, is also pointing out that this could also, one, they claiming it's a threat to media freedom, but also there'd be job losses.
Yeah, absolutely. And part of the bank's counter to that is that Sekunjalo should be able to carry on operating as they are, because they actually have other accounts that are still open. And the knock-on will be if all the banks follow one another, and then that's a concerted behaviour of and that is a risk, and I think that is something that wouldn't be fair unless each bank took an independent, justifiable decision, which at this stage they haven't all taken the same view. So that shouldn't be the base case outcome from here.
I guess it'll be interesting to see where this goes. Thank you very much, Grant Nader. He's with Benguela Global Fund Managers. Okay, let's take you back.